Hey there, I'm Sam Mortensen, and today I'm going to be talking about MIDI Tape, which is a web app I built that lets you kind of have an OP-1 style 4-track MIDI recorder. This is kind of cool for people with a bunch of MIDI synths, or I guess 4, or something like this MC101 Groovebox, which has 4 MIDI channels you can send stuff to. The reason I built this is I just wanted something kind of like OP-1's tape mode, and I didn't want to use a full DAW. And I'm a programmer, so I also kind of wanted to play around with web MIDI and make something useful that I can just sit with and play with without having to go into a huge production setting. So I'm going to go through the basic functionality and then make a song. And I may have to fast forward through making a song because I'm quite slow. So let's go through the basic functionality. First, the thing you see on your screen is MIDI tape. So kind of like OP-1, it's got a cassette tape in the middle. It's keyboard controlled, which means you could run this on like an embedded device, maybe a Raspberry Pi, and control it with something like a numpad, something with not a lot of inputs. It also means you don't have to use the mouse, and you can kind of use it one-handed in a lot of scenarios, so that's very useful too while you play. Yeah, so let's just get into it. So right below the cassette tape is the timeline. This should look familiar. It displays a green cursor where you're at. You can press forward and back on the arrow keys to move around. Press shift forward and back to kind of scan through bars. It just jumps you to the nearest bar. If you press up and down, you'll see in the top left the BPM changes. And shift kind of jumps more. But the most important thing, I guess, to get started is actually setting up MIDI. So you noticed in the bottom here, we have input and 4 tracks. These are the MIDI devices and channels we'll be using to record. So to change the input, I'm going to hold down I and go up and down until I see my device. So now I see the key step is selected. And then for each track, you just hold down the track number and then do the same thing. So I went up to MC101 on track 1. On track 2, I'm going to use channel 2. Track 3, you'll use channel 3. Track 4, I'll use channel 4. So now with nothing else, you basically have like a really easy way to just pass through MIDI messages from an input to the target channel. So we're on 1, which is the drum track. Not sure how well you can hear that. To change tracks, you just press the track number. So you can kind of see it's highlighted on the timeline. So track 2, what I set up is kind of like a synth, a lot of echo. Track 3 is some like detuned keys. And then track 4 is some effect I picked. Called detuned noise. So you notice that all the controls are happening through the web app. I'm not changing MIDI channels here because it's kind of just piping all the input messages in MIDI all the way through to the web app and then to this output device. And I'm also not touching my MC101 because it's kind of just working as a sound engine right now. Of course, the sound is really coming from it, so you can always adjust things directly on the device, like volume. And any other settings. So now we've got our inputs and outputs set up, and we know how to move on the timeline. Let's actually record. So to do that, you can press P for play, and you can hear that there's a metronome. I'm going to turn it off because it's a little loud. And you can also press R to record. So let's just record some stuff with these detuned keys. So you can see that we kind of have a representation of the notes down there. If we go all the way back, which you can do by doing Shift P, which is kind of like stop, or you can just go back. So I'll do Shift P. We'll turn off recording just to be safe, and let's play back. That's great. Kind of a bad thing is because I didn't have the metronome, I don't really know where we're at. Like I can just look at the bars and kind of assume that I'm on time, but the metronome is important for doing this right. So we'll turn that back on. But first I need to clean up what's here. So let's do that by using the start and end markers. So kind of like the OP-1 also, you can have start and end markers anywhere on the timeline by pressing T and Y. The start marker is turquoise for T and the end is yellow for Y. That just made sense in my head. So you can select any section. I'm doing it on the bar because I kind of record on the bar, but you can do it anywhere that your cursor is. And then you just press delete and it'll delete what's there. I just set the start marker to the start of the whole song, the whole tape, so it kind of disappears. So you can kind of assume if there's only an end marker, you're selecting everything before it. So I'm going to clear everything out, and now we're going to have a 4-bar loop. What you'll notice when we play is that when it reaches the end of the loop, it'll go back to the beginning. So you can do this to record short bits that you want to reuse. So I'm going to turn the metronome back on, and I'm also going to turn count in on. So I probably didn't say it, but the metronome is M and count in is shift M. So I'm not going to do a recording this time, but I'll play along. So we'll get a 4 quarter note count in, and then we can start. Metronome is like overpowering the device, so sorry about that, but we'll go ahead and record that. So I think the thing I did was okay, I think I'm ready. So we're back at the beginning, count in still on, so I should be ready to do this in time. The OP-1, you don't have quantizing, so you have to actually play the notes correctly and in time, which is a challenge going from something like a sequencer, which plays everything perfectly if you want it to. So let's go ahead and listen to what I did, and I'll turn the metronome off. And count in still on, so let's turn that off too. Yep, it sounds good enough to me. I'll do Shift P to go back to the beginning, and let's add something else. I don't know how good I'll do live, but let's see if I can just figure it out. Something like that sounds okay. It's okay. It's okay for a demo. So again, the metronome wasn't on, so it probably is a little out of time. But let's say we like this loop and we want to reuse it. So how you can do that is if you go to the end of a end segment. So again, like I pressed Y to mark this as the end of our loop or end of, whatever time thing we're doing. And then you press V. V will paste the current track. So I just copied and pasted track 2. You don't explicitly copy. You're kind of like the thing you're selected is always copied. That's just how I did it. If you press Shift V, you'll copy and paste all tracks. So I'll do that, and we'll set our end marker to the end of 8 bars and just listen. Yeah, the timing's not great, but it sounds fine. So I'll go to this 4th track, and again, this is like detuned noise. I don't know what to do. okay, we'll figure it out. It's weird. It's kind of syncopated or just out of time. But let's pretend like I didn't like that last recording, which it's fine. You can also do overdubbing, which if you have used the OP-1 or anything that does overdubbing, it should make sense to you. The only difference here is in the OP-1 you have takes, which are kind of like audio clips. Since this is MIDI, I didn't do that because we already kind of have an abstraction of when something starts and ends. You know, we have notes, we have pitch changes, we have all sorts of stuff. So overdubbing just straight up records over the current thing. So I'm going to play with overdubbing and it's just going to wipe the track. Because I'm dubbing it over and I'm not playing anything. Let's do a retake. Pause because overdub was still on, so I would have kept losing stuff. So let's just listen. Cool. So I have 3 tracks recorded. It seemed to work pretty well. I think the main feature I haven't shown yet is that you can also do pitch changes and control changes in recording. So we're just gonna do some pitch changing of that track we just recorded. I'll turn on the volume a little bit. On my key step, I'm gonna use this little pitch thing. That sounds great. I'm not the biggest fan of how that sounds, but we're going to record it anyway, just so you can tell. So a really important thing is making sure overdub is off if you use it, otherwise you're just going to lose stuff, but we're going to do some pitch changes. It's fine. So you can see that the pitch change is in purple down there. That's cool. It's separated from the notes. You know, you don't get to see the individual notes you're playing because this is a really simple recorder. But you can see the pitch changes. Let's say I'm unhappy with that because it doesn't sound very good. If you hold down Shift and delete, it deletes all pitch changes and control changes. So you can see the purple lines disappeared, and now we just have the clear notes. Control changes are done too. I've got my key step set up to do a lot of control changes, and I can't really see it very well, but a door key mapping, so I actually know what parts of the MC1 they control. So that's a good demo line. Cutoff is pretty common. We want to make sure we're in bank 1. Let's just listen to what cutoff might be. We can probably get a dark effect, so let's do it. So that controls the control changes. So again, with this color theme, it's a control change, so it's cyan. The thing with these is that pitch bends are temporary, or at least this thing pretends they are. So when the song is stopped, it'll actually reset the pitch bend to 0 for all of the output devices and all the channels. That makes sense for pitch bends, but control changes aren't necessarily temporary. Like you may want your baseline cutoff, which is what we were just changing, to always be like 62. So why I'm talking about this is that when you end a track, that cutoff will stay the same. So you have to think of this like, what's a good way to say it? when you pause playback, the control changes will stick. So let's just see what I'm talking about. So I just paused after a bunch of control changes. If we listen to what this sounds like now, it's hard to tell, but the control change stuck around. Anyway, so something to note. So you can definitely hear it that you hear the pitch is kind of set off. So that's a thing. Anyway, so I'm gonna do Shift Delete again to get rid of those, and I'm gonna reset my cutoff so we just know that we're at 62 or 63, whatever half of 127 pretends to be. Yeah, that's kind of it. I feel like most of the time people spend this will be doing these start and ends, copy pasting, deleting, and recording. But that is basically all the features. I'm gonna try to record a song. I'm not gonna like show my entire thing, but we'll try to make this sound good, and I'll post it. So yeah, so just to talk about a little extra features about how it works, we're gonna set the start and end to this empty section. I don't know if you can see it, but a MIDI clock output is sent from this to all the devices. And you'll notice that it's supposed to be 110 BPM and it's a little off. It's like 111. And when it loops, it gets jittery, which makes sense because it's restarting, but it's off, right? So that could be my code, but it's also because this is written in JavaScript, which is kind of unreliable and kind of slow. So the resolution of this, if you care about MIDI that much, is only 46 ppq, which means that that's how many times the like event loop or whatever for this is called every step, every part. That's the like the highest resolution I can go without this being really inconsistent at higher BPMs. But as we switch around the BPMs, I just switched to 110, so it's going to take it a little bit to, or 100, so it'll take it a little bit to adjust, but it's always just a little off. That's just kind of like how it's going to go. I know that's kind of counterintuitive because when you think of MIDI, you want something really precise, but part of what makes this fun is that it's not a DAW, it's not a expensive device like this. It's just something fun for recording tracks. So don't take it too seriously, and maybe this will give your song some groove because the timing's actually kind of fucked up. So yeah, there we go. So I'm gonna stop talking and then try to make this into a song, and then we'll play it back. Okay, I think that was it. Yeah, if this looks interesting or funky, or you have some MIDI stuff you want to try out, you can go to mortensen.coffee/MIDI tape and give it a try. Thanks for watching.